Hi, I'm Dr. Justine Green, and this is the Completely Me podcast. I'm an award-winning children's book author of the Completely Me series that teaches children all about differences, disabilities, and self-acceptance. So today, I am here with a very special guest who is near and dear to my heart, my mom, Mrs. Lisa Rosen. I am so happy to have you here, Mom.
I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. So what we really wanted to do today is introduce me, who I am, and for you to not only see my world, but through also the lens of a parent. I was born with atresia and microtia. One affects the outer ear and one affects the ear canal. I was born without an eardrum on my left side, and the ear that was there was deformed. I had 3 surgeries by the time I was 9 years old, and then out of hospitals and doctors' offices. And it really shaped who I became. It was absolutely used as motivation. I got my doctorate in education leadership, focusing on students with disabilities. I was an inclusive educator for years, an administrator, mommy and me instructor, and author all about differences. And I thought it would be really interesting to highlight my upbringing and the perspective of a parent with a child with disabilities. Let's go back to the beginning. When I was born, how did you know right away that I was different?
It was literally the second you were actually born. It wasn't something we knew about ahead of time. And after you were born, I remember them putting you on top of me, and then they take you and they do all that APGAR scoring, and they were calling codes. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? Because I'm stuck in the bed. I can't do anything. And I had your dad go over, and there were a ton of doctors that came into the room to look at you. And I had no idea that there was anything different. And they mentioned that the ear was not formed properly and that they needed to do an immediate sonogram of your kidneys because I didn't realize, but developmentally, the kidney and the ear develop at the same exact time. So they were very worried about that, but thank God you have 2 functioning kidneys. And it was just a mess in the hospital. They took you for testing, and then the next day the pediatrician came in and he said, I set up a bunch of appointments with a plastic surgeon for you and an ENT. And I said, what do I need an ENT for? And he said, well, you know she can't hear. And I did not know you couldn't hear. How would I know that? I knew nothing about the condition. And back then, you couldn't just Wikipedia anything.
I was going to talk to you about the research.
So research was a very, very big deal. You needed to go to the library. You needed to do your research. It wasn't that accessible. And it was quite an ordeal in the hospital. I came home and I was swollen from all the crying that occurred during that time. I even remember talking to the doctor that delivered you, who was a woman who I loved, and she sat with me the day you were born when I got to my room. And I said, how did this happen? How didn't we know? And she actually unfurled the baby blanket and said, count her fingers, count her toes, she's perfect. And everything else, will work itself out. And don't worry about that right now. Enjoy your baby.
So is it hereditary? How, because I have to say this because when I was growing up, I asked you, how did this happen? Why me? And you had one go-to little story that you used to tell me, and it was how I laid in your belly on my ear and that it folded it right up, but I was really comfy. But that's not true.
No, that is definitely not
Lies.
true.
So Didn't Poppy Jaime have something like this?
He did not have any physical anomaly. He was older and he was hard of hearing. So we don't know if he had it when he was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out that I have a
Yes.
hearing
And
issue.
how did you find out?
I found out I have a hearing issue when I took you at like 6 months old for your hearing test. And the person in the sound booth realized that I was hearing less than you were hearing. So I had to go back for my own hearing test, and I actually needed
Two
two
surgeries.
surgeries. But what I have isn't what you have. I have a condition called otosclerosis,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the stapes in the inner ear usually moves and flutters, and mine got sticky. So they actually removed that and they put a prosthetic in instead. But it was
I
a
don't feel like
very
I knew that.
fluke thing that
So you're
found that.
welcome.
Yes,
You caught it
exactly.
because of me.
I did.
And when you first told me that they found something so serious that it could have left you deaf in only a few years
That is
without being found,
correct.
right?
And the condition was accelerated with pregnancy because it relates to hormones. So that
That's
being
interesting.
pregnant with you accelerated that
Oh, so
condition.
I take back. You don't have to thank me anymore. So I am one of three kids. So I have two brothers, one older, one younger. Did you ever have to have a conversation with them about me being different, or did they ever bring up the fact that I was either hard of hearing or that my ear was different? Did they ever talk about it?
It wasn't them so much. And when you were born and we noticed this disability, your dad and I made a pact that you were never going to feel different, less of a person. We were never going to make a big deal about it. So your brothers, it was just who you were. They really
Mm.
didn't pay much attention to it, but you definitely spoke very loud as a child.
You know, it's funny that you say that because all of us had speech. We all had speech therapists. We went through it for a long time. But I get that question all the time, or like a statement of, but you speak so nicely.
Well, that was a very, very big concern of ours that, with this, we didn't know how much you would be able to hear,
Yeah.
whether your speech would be okay, whether you would hit those milestones when you were supposed to, which fortunately you did.
I always speak loudly, and everyone tells me to like bring it down a notch. But what's really interesting is that I try to match my environment. If there's a lot of noise around me, I feel like I have to compensate for how loud I hear things. So it's almost like I'm trying to speak over the noise I hear, but not everyone is hearing that noise. So they just hear me speaking really loud. I think it really helped being a teacher because I was able to project without anyone saying they couldn't hear me or repeating things. I also think that it helped when I was an administrator. I was able to speak without a microphone. So there were some benefits, but that's something that still is an issue for me. My mom created a composition book journal from the day we were born and gave it to us on our 18th birthday. And she was able to write down stories and notes and really keep everything organized because back then we didn't have, cameras on our phones or even
Phones.
come on, don't age me. But I really am so grateful that you took notes and you wrote down about my experiences because reading through it and looking at the pictures, and you even kept a little card that I made the doctor who did my ear surgeries. You've kept so many little tokens and pieces of information that I feel like unlocked memories. As soon as I was reading it, I was like, oh, I remember that, or this is how I remember it. So I think that that was really interesting. And I'd love to go through some of the things that you wrote for me. So this is my journal. I have been taking notes of things I really want to talk about, but it includes lots of different things from poems to things from school and stories. So the first thing I wanted to bring up is I found it very interesting. So I was born December 14th, 1990, but it wasn't until June of 1992 that you first brought up my ear.
I just felt that that was not the thing that defined you. And it wasn't all consuming after you were born. Like for years, we really didn't have to do much other than like the hearing test. And so I wasn't like all consumed with it.
Did any of the moms in Mommy and Me or any of the instructors or other kids point it out when I was like very young?
More so when you were in preschool. And then it got much worse as you got a little bit older. Like by the time, it, it's funny because we took you to a plastic surgeon when you were about 5.
I have
And
that in
yeah,
here.
and he said she's going to want the surgery. And I'm like, I don't know. I make her feel so good about herself. She'll be fine. I think, she's going to live with it. He said, when she's 7, she's going to tell you she wants the surgery.
He literally said
He
7.
said 7. He said, when she is 7, and I will never forget, it was Thanksgiving
I have it
morning.
here. I have it here.
See, that's how
It
much I
says here,
remember it.
the first talk of having surgery.
Wasn't it like Thanksgiving? I remember you walking in the
Yeah.
room very matter-of-factly saying, oh, you were talking to me
Mm-hmm.
about something, and then you said, oh, and by the way, I decided I want the surgery. And that was the end of it. That was it. And I started crying. I'm like, what do you mean she wants the surgery? I don't understand. Like, she feels so good about herself. Why does she want to undergo
Yeah,
all of that pain? But he was right, and you wanted it.
I know. And I actually remember some of it. I don't remember the first time kids were mean to me. I do remember one incident after I've already had one surgery, but I don't remember beforehand. What was the first, do you remember if I like ever came home crying or telling you that someone made fun of me?
You really weren't that kind of kid. You were tough, a lot stronger than I could have ever been. Like with that surgery, I get a blood test and I'm like, I have to psych myself up before I get a blood test. That I had 3 kids is a miracle. But you weren't like one to come home and complain about that. No, you didn't. You really kept that bottled up inside. Even
Yeah.
as you got older and we knew that it was going on, you just really didn't share the details with us.
I feel like I didn't share a lot of what was going on until I finally accepted myself, and that wasn't until like my mid to late 20s. I think that I really kind of bottled it up
I
and
think
kind of
so.
used it within, and I was always so self-conscious. But what's interesting is that after I started being open about my ear and my disability and being an advocate for children with disabilities, that people who knew me back in middle school and elementary school, even high school, they had no idea I was ever struggling with this or that I even had a different ear or.
But it wasn't even like you hid it. You played basketball, your hair was in a ponytail.
But I used to do a low ponytail
Yes, you did.
where it was kind of hidden. I tried to hide it. I tried to have earrings so that at least that would look kind of normal. But I remember someone walking up to me in the middle of like a crowded cafeteria in high school, and they just walked right up to me, did not know me, and they were just, "Oh my gosh, you're the girl with that fake ear, no way." And my heart sank. Like I thought I was doing so well, and that's how people were talking about me. And then there was this one girl who was not kind, one of my bullies for a long time, and she actually called me a deaf bee, and that broke my heart. I think that saying things that people can't change is just so hurtful on a new level. How does that have anything to do with you?
Exactly. It's not what defines you.
And before we get into this, there was something else we really wanted to talk about, and that's being an advocate for your child with disabilities, because you did such a good job with that.
Thank you.
You taught me to be an advocate for myself.
Absolutely.
And when did that start?
It started when you went to school because when you have one functioning hearing ear, I didn't want to create a disability for you. So we're fortunate enough that you have one hearing ear. That hearing ear needed to be facing the teacher.
I actually became so comfortable with that front left seat with my ear to the teacher and my ear to everyone. If you ever see me in a classroom, I am front left, like exactly that corner.
And I remember meeting the teachers ahead of time, asking them if they were going to be strolling through the classroom,
Yep.
explaining that
I'm a
if
lip
they
reader.
go to the other side, they put you at a tremendous disability because you will not be able to hear anything on that side. So I explained to them where you needed to sit. I told them to be aware. Please let us know if you are being bullied or made fun of. So the teachers, for the most part, were very understanding and accommodating, but it definitely was something I needed to put out there before classes began.
I also want to put out there that I am a lip reader. So if you ever cover your mouth, that's really difficult for me. And this whole COVID masks thing was so, so extremely difficult. I also want to put on the record that back then, since I only have one hearing ear, there really wasn't hearing aid options for me. All it would do was amplify my hearing on my right ear, which wasn't really necessary. It was like I was missing so much sound on my left side that just amplifying my right did nothing. And if I did not want to look like I was wearing headgear 24/7, then there was nothing for me. Fast forward to COVID, when the masks were a huge issue, I was really noticing my disability. I went to my audiologist, who I love. You'll meet her soon. But she was telling me how Bluetooth technology created something called the cross hearing aid system. One side is a microphone and one side is a receiver. So I remember I brought you with me to that appointment. We taped it on my left side. You'll see there's a little hearing aid without a bar, anything to hold it on, because my ear is so flat against my head that there's nothing for it to grab onto. So that microphone is right there. And she stood behind me on my left side and she whispered, and I heard her. And when that happened, my mom and I started tearing up, and it was something I never thought would happen. And it was really an amazing experience.
Amazing. But you should also tell everybody after that, it was like a tease because they couldn't figure out a way
To get it
to
on.
hold it in
Yes.
place. And even the other day, when I watched your little video on how you apply your hearing
Yeah.
aids, and I saw that you just use fashion tape and stick it to your ear, I started to cry because I can't believe that you're still dealing with that,
Yeah.
that they couldn't find a better solution.
They did have other solutions. One was to implant it on a headband. And I would have to wear a headband 24/7. And let me tell you, I'm not a headband girl. I just
You
don't
never
look good.
were.
I never, ever. We figured out what type of a hearing aid I needed. We ordered it in the right color. And then all of a sudden, we couldn't figure out how to get it to stay.
For months.
For months.
Months.
They actually sent the hearing aid on my left side back to all of these different companies to try to find something that may put it right in my ear and hold on. But the inside actually has literally nothing to hold
Nothing.
on to. There's not even that little piece in front. I know it has a term, but I don't even know. But I don't even have that piece. And it's stuck to my head, so there's nothing that can hold behind it.
Exactly.
So it was definitely really tough, but we figured it out. We had to MacGyver it, and we did a great job. And now I use them all the time. When I take them off, it's like I'm turning off the world. I didn't realize how much sound I was missing, but I really was at such a disadvantage, and I didn't even know. And I also could not see properly. So I was just kind of making my way downtown.
But I must say, you should be very proud of yourself, and we're very proud of you.
Back into this, we rounded out. We're taking circles. The first time you talk about my surgeries was in 1995 when I was still 4. And you talk about how you went to see a plastic surgeon regarding my outer ear, and you were in tears by nightfall. You just kept thinking of how little I am and how can we put you through all of this. And then Dad keeps telling you that we're doing me a favor by having me go through these operations, but that you're an extremely beautiful girl. Me, yes, I am. Very outgoing and sociable, and that I play with others well, and that you don't know if I really needed a surgery, but if we don't go through with it, that I will be teased and ridiculed by my peers as I grow older. So that you're trying to make the right decision. That if I could go through any of this for you, I would in a second.
And as a mother, I'm sure you feel the same way. I remember us asking, because your first surgery, they needed to cut open your stomach,
Yeah.
go through stomach muscles, get cartilage, form that cartilage from your ribs into an ear, and then put that ear under the back of your existing little ear under skin. Like they made like a flap. And they said the worst part of that surgery is the abdominal surgery. So right away I asked, well, can I give her my cartilage? Let me at least do that part for her. And they said, you're not a perfect match. The most perfect match is her.
I mean, I totally understand because now I have kids, and if there's any pain that I could ever take away from them, I would. But I don't think you ended up going to this doctor, right? You saw a doctor before. I was reading all about it. You saw one doctor who was like, we're not going to have to use the cartilage. She has enough right here that we could repurpose.
See, I don't even remember that.
And then a few months later, he retracted his statement and said, we actually do have to cut through and use cartilage. And that's when you chose to go to one of the best doctors who does this in the state or in the country. And that's Dr. Charlie Thorne.
Yes.
And we recently went to a specialist in the University of Miami for a checkup, talking to them about what I could do for my ear and some issues that I've been having. And he told us that there's only 3 microtia doctors, like plastic surgeons, who specialize in this in the entire world. One in New York, one in California, and one in Paris, I believe, right? Isn't that what he said? Paris.
I don't remember.
But that's shocking that there's only 3 doctors to choose from for something like this. So the first time we talk about having the surgery was over Thanksgiving weekend. You threw me for a loop. On your way into the bath, you ran over to me in your nudity.
Nudity, that's what I used to call it.
And said, oh, by the way, I decided to have the operation, so just make the appointment. I almost fainted on the floor. I figured you accepted the way it looked and you would wait until you were an adult. I ask you if kids tease you or ask you questions, and you tell me not really. it's hard. You even say I was a closed mouth child. You really don't share that much with me. And I had my speech with you again and told you that if you don't have a sister to talk to, mommy can be your mom, your sister, and your best friend. And you said, I know, I can tell you anything. So I know you know the rule, but you don't follow it.
Exactly.
That does sound like me. But I remember Dr. Thorne's office.
There's one thing I do remember because he didn't only deal with microtia and atresia, he dealt with all different craniofacial disorders. And I remember
The waiting room.
the waiting room and you looking at me and saying, I am so lucky
Yeah.
that this is all that I have that's wrong with me, like compared to
Some of the
some of the
children.
other
I
children
remember
that
that
I'm
waiting room.
blessed. I'll never forget that waiting room.
And before we actually went through with the surgeries, you had me meet other children who went through the surgeries so that I could ask them all the questions. And I think that was also really helpful for me to get firsthand experiences.
He put me in touch with an organization called Forward Face, and they were able to help me. They had a newsletter. They were able to help me speak to some other moms, and one family was nice enough where the mom and the daughter who just went through the
They met up
same
with us.
surgery, they met up with
I
us.
remember like a diner or
Yes,
something.
yes, and she was like a year older than you, so she had the surgery the previous year, and it was a very, very big help for the two of us,
Yeah,
just knowing what to expect.
that's interesting. I like that. I liked having a firsthand experience, someone who went through what I was about to go through and was able to tell us all about it. So that was really good advice, is to speak to other people in similar situations to realize that you're not alone. After that surgery, you kind of explained it where they put the ear that they created from the cartilage, which is the one you see now, behind my like existing ear. And for one part of my life, I had 3 ears on my head.
That's
And
correct.
that's really when I remember my first true experience with a child being so hurtful. I remember it was a windy day at school and the wind blew my hair back and a girl on the playground saw my double ear experience on my left side and ran away screaming. And I just broke down. Like, me? You're scared of me? I love butterflies and animals, and I'm nice and friendly, and I love to help people. And you're scared of me?
And what it is that people, children, are just so uneducated and unaware. And when I grew up, we were taught if you saw somebody with a disability,
Don't
look
look.
away, pretend, like almost pretend they don't exist, which is the
Also, very hurtful.
worst possible thing you could do. And it just really comes from ignorance.
It does. I think that there's so much that children don't know. And when they are so direct with their questions or their statements, it comes off really hurtful. And that's really why I wrote my book series, is to open up conversation about differences, and that a lot of their questions stemmed from just not understanding these differences. But I went through this back in the 90s and times were different. And you actually wrote an article back then. Can I read it? Do
I
you want to read it?
I would read it if you want.
Your glasses are right there.
Thank you. Well, a lot of this stems from feeling that I was to blame, like something had to have
I
caused
remember always
this.
asking, but why me? And when I went through my doctoral studies, part of the disability acceptance phase number one is the why me phase. And that was really tough for me. Why me? I feel like I'm a good person. And your response back then was God would never give you something you can't handle and that you're strong and you're capable. But it's
I believe
interesting
that.
and important to hear it from a parent's perspective.
So this was something, and I was very young when all of this was going on. I had you, I was 28 years old, 29, around that, and it was really a lot to deal with. So this is an article that I wrote that they published in that
Forward
Forward
facing?
Face newsletter, and I called it Whose Fault Is It Anyway? I'm the mother. It has to be my fault. The doctors reassure me that it's genetic and no one is to blame. Then how come I can't stop thinking about what I could have possibly done during my pregnancy to cause this to happen? I didn't have a sip of alcohol during the entire 9 months. I stayed away from all caffeine and diet sodas. Maybe it was that one time I used nasal spray when I had a cold. Or maybe it happened because I inhaled the chemicals that they used at the beauty salon while I was having my nails manicured. I'm the mother. This child came from my body. How can I not be to blame? My daughter is a beautiful 8-year-old child who was born with a condition known as microtia and atresia. What that means, in a language that you and I can understand, is that she was born with a malformed outer ear. She is also missing an ear canal and has extremely limited hearing on one side. I am currently helping her to prepare for her first surgery. She is to undergo a series of 3 to 4 operations. I am learning so much from this 8-year-old child. She is far braver than I ever could be. She is facing this ordeal with enthusiasm. She has many well thought out questions that need to be answered. I, on the other hand, am trying to be brave for her. As a mother, I am finding this situation so difficult to deal with. There are those questions that my daughter is asking me that I just don't have the right answers for. My daughter will look at me with tears in her eyes and ask, Mommy, why wasn't I born with 2 perfect ears just like yours? I reassure her that her ears will look like mine when her surgeries are completed. I am writing this letter to thank those of you who I met or spoke to with the assistance of Forward Face. Listening to your stories is helping me to prepare for what I am about to experience with my own daughter. In addition, when I hear that all of you are blaming yourselves for your children's conditions, I want to hug you and tell you that you are not to blame. But who am I to tell you when I feel the same way? There have been so many of you who have been available to share your experiences, answer my questions, and address my concerns. My daughter has even met with another young girl who has undergone the same surgeries just 1 year prior. I thank these women and I thank Forward Face.
That was beautiful. That was a very long and intense part of my disability acceptance stage was the why me? I just don't understand. And that's why I always tried to put good out in the world is because I thought and I feel it's true still to this day that good will come back to me and that I try to help others and I I always thought that that would come back to me too.
And I think it does because I have been with you all different kinds of places, from a train, a trip, sitting on a bench, and little children run over to you. You're
It's true. No
so
matter where I go,
approachable.
I am.
They feel safe with you. They feel that you're one of their
I
peers.
feel like they can tell from my aura that they are safe with me.
I believe that
I feel like I
too.
am a safe
And
space.
if I didn't see it so many times,
Yeah.
I would say, oh, you must be exaggerating.
But it is true.
It
Even on
is
a
true.
crowded subway, they'll come and show me a toy. It's
Yes.
really interesting. I remember when I was at graduation. I don't know if you remember this. My dad is not an emotional person. I'm just going to straight up say that. He can't deal with emotions, disregards my emotions. But on the day of my doctoral degree, like graduation,
Yes.
where my dissertation was all about students with disabilities and how I really wanted to go about changing the world for people and children with disabilities. And he got emotional and he said, I just never imagined that when you were born with your ear, that it would end up being your motivation to help others. Imagine if all we do is look at every child as having needs that are specific for them. Every child has different needs, and it's just whatever is necessary for you. And so for someone to be special needs or at such a disadvantage or disability, I think we're all different. It's a matter of how we live our life and all the good things that we put out there, and that we recognize commonalities and similarities before these differences.
And think about it, not all disabilities are out there for people to see. Some are hiding deep down within.
And what's very interesting? I truly believe that mine is kind of half-half. You don't notice my ear unless I tell you. You don't notice that I have a hearing issue unless I tell you I have a hearing issue. And if I show you, that's when you really know. I have to self-disclose, or I have to show you. So that's also really interesting as to my own self-acceptance. How or when do I want to tell you about it? It's not very in your face, or if. And for a long time, it was if. And now it's really when. And I am very clear about it. I remember when my son, for the first time, brought up my ear. My heart dropped. I was nervous. What is he going to say? Is it going to hurt my feelings? And he said that mommy has one open ear and one closed ear, and that's okay. And it was so accepted right away.
Nice.
And I think that that's so nice and important for them to grow up recognizing that although I'm different, that's okay.
And you hope he and everybody else, all these little kids, are more accepting.
So, although we can talk forever because we're really good at it.
And we will spend the rest of the day
We
together.
would. We really would. We have so much we wanted to talk about. But I am so grateful that this was my first podcast for the Completely Me channel, because this really gets to show who I am, the perspective of my parent, and what I really went through as a child growing up and growing into myself. And it means a lot to me.
I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
Even though I know I'm not so entertaining.
She did a good job. Thank you so much again. And tune in next week. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit the like button. To learn more about child development, parenting, and the disabled world, make sure to hit subscribe. Also, don't forget to sign up for the Completely Me activity kits that your little ones will love. See you again soon.